Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. How are you? Have a good day, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, now we will come to today's news. Kevin McCarthy is out there. Again, not just saying come to the border. So that Korean Jumpier can lie about Biden ever been to the border. But McCarthy sent a letter to the House January 6, Committee Chairman Benny Thompson yesterday, demanding preservation of committee records for the incoming Republican-controlled Congress next January. Oh, McCarthy. He definitely wants to be Speaker of the House. He's saying and doing the right things. How come you weren't doing it before? Oh, because he wasn't the Speaker of the House. Yeah. How come he wasn't on our side before? Only when he wanted to get votes. Oh, he's destroying our side. He's been working secretly against us. This guy is an absolute Trojan horse. Do not fall for it. I'm not gonna go into more detail because Kevin McCarthy is a fake. He's a think he's faux. He's not the real deal. And he's actually against us. But in my journalistic integrity, I must report that Kevin McCarthy did send a letter to Benny Thompson, telling the January 6th on Select Committee to preserve their documents. And that he's going to hold hearings on the LAX Capitol security. Elon Musk did meet with Apple CEO Tim Cook, after threatening to go to war over the App Store. According to Elon Musk, Tim Cook said that they were never having plans to take Twitter off of the App Store. Wow. I want to end with this. Netanyahu says that Donald Trump did great things for Israel, and that he's not essentially an anti-Semite or a racist. Benjamin Netanyahu said he has been talking to President Trump talking about President Trump. He has been a tremendous supporter of Israel. And I'm unabashedly appreciative of what he did for Israel. He did great things for Israel, and recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, long overdue, given it happened 3,000 years ago, under King David. He moved the American embassy there. He recognized our sovereignty on the Golan Heights, from which we were attacked for years by Syria. He got out of this dangerous Iran deal, and I appreciate all that it doesn't take away from, and also, he's been very supportive of the Jewish people. So I think he made a mistake. I hope it's not repeated. That's all I can tell you. Once again, is ridiculous of all people to call anti-Semitic. President Trump, when he did those things, and the incoming Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who he worked with, says the exact opposite. But of course, this will be completely summarily ignored by the mainstream media as they continue their talking points. And this is some big news. As it's happening, Fauci is absolutely falling apart. We're going to take a look at the reports coming out of his disastrous 7-hour deposition. We're going to see how we took flailing to a whole new level, and make sure to stick them to the very end of this video, when we'll find out the most shocking revelation of them all. You're not going to want to miss this. As many of you know, Dr. Anthony Fauci was interviewed under oath for reported 7 hours last week, as part of numerous lawsuits against the Biden administration filed by Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt. At the heart of the filings are allegations that White House officials and federal agencies colluded with big tech to deliberately suppress and censor viewpoints that demur word from the official narrative surrounding the entire COVID saga. And so last week, Schmidt hauled in none other than Tony Fauci himself into a deposition in Washington, D.C. While we don't have the official transcript as of yet, a number of reports are describing what was seen one of the more humorous and trolling aspects of the 7-hour deposition. Apparently, Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry, who's part of the lawsuit with the Missouri Attorney General, displayed a book on his desk to deliberately rattle Fauci. It was Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., is excoriating the real Anthony Fauci, which is just utterly brilliant regardless. According to Miranda Devine, of the New York Post, throughout the 7-hour deposition, Fauci, his demeanor was cocky and deceitful. There was no humility or admission of fallibility, no reflection that the lockdowns may have done more harm than good, especially to children's schooling, or that vaccine mandates were pointlessly divisive. Instead, what's being widely reported is that Fauci suffered throughout the 7 hours from the sudden lack of recall. That's exactly what Jeff Landry, the Louisiana Attorney General, tweeted out, quote, "Wow, it was amazing to spend 7 hours with Dr. Fauci, the man who single-handedly wrecked the U.S. economy based upon, quote, the science, only to discover that he can't recall practically anything dealing with his, and that amnesia-inspired evasion and deflection apparently characterized the whole of the deposition." Fauci reportedly denied knowing anything about the proxy funding of dangerous gain-of-function research on viruses by the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, even though we have the emails that indicate otherwise. Back in June of last year, thousands of private emails from Fauci were released to The Washington Post, to CNN, BuzzFeed News through the Freedom of Information Act. These were emails dating from January to June the year 2020, when COVID first reached our shores and developed into a full-blown pandemic. And the emails were in many respects absolutely startling. They were startling in terms of what they revealed about the radical discrepancy between what Fauci actually knew about the lab leak theory from the very beginning, and what he publicly stated he knew, which is obviously a huge problem for Voucher given that such public statements are under oath. But we now know that as early as January 31, 2020, Fauci had received an email from the head of the nation's largest biomedical research facility, warning Fauci that COVID was very possibly engineered, coming from a lab rather than from a so-called wet market. So the whole question of COVID lab origin was front and center with Fauci and the NIH from the very beginning of all of this. But of course, given that the NIH funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan, there appears to have been very deliberate efforts to downplay that origins theory so as to cover up that funding. But there's an even bigger revelation coming out of this deposition that's going to absolutely shock you. But first, gang, as you can see, the world is going insane. We've got a president who's shaking hands with ghosts, people aren't even there on the stage with them, and a deep state that's more desperate than ever. I don't know how many of you are familiar with what's called the Great Barrington Declaration. Was penned by eminent medical experts in the most prestigious universities in both the United States and the UK, such as Stanford and Harvard over here on this side of the pond. It was published in October of 2020. And it argued for a less extreme, more scientifically orthodox way of dealing with the virus. And the basic gist was to provide maximum protection for at-risk populations such as the old or those with pre-existing conditions, while at the same time allowing the rest of the population, particularly school-aged children, right, younger populations, to just live out their lives normally. Fauci, during this deposition, was directly confronted with the question as to why he rejected the Great Barrington Declaration. In fact, we have emails between Fauci and Francis Collins, the director of NIH, that explicitly stated they wanted to deliberately discredit the Great Barrington authors. Here's what was one of Francis Collins' emails to Fauci, quote, "The proposal from the three fringe epidemiologists seems to be getting a lot of attention, and even a co-signature from Nobel Prize winner Mike Levitt at Stanford. There needs to be a quick and devastating takedown of its premises. But I don't see anything like that online yet. Is it underway?" And that is ultimately what these lawsuits are about, this clear collusion between big government, big tech, and pushing a single authorized narrative while at the same time suppressing any alternative or dissent to that narrative. Fauci was pushed on this, and apparently, he responded by fully defending the Chinese lockdown strategy. According to a report by the Epoch Times, Fauci claimed that the inspiration for our lockdown here came from none other than Communist China. And that seems to have been what he said on CNN of late. Everyone listen to this. The China's official news agency today published an op-ed, asserting that the country's strict COVID measures are scientific and effective, or are they? Well, when you want to shut down, in order to interrupt immediately a process that's going on, like the spread of infection, they should be a purpose to it. Like you want to make sure you get enough ventilators or enough PPE, or you want to get your population vaccinated. The comment that I made about this severe actions that they've taken is that you have to have an end game. What's the purpose if the purpose is let's get all the people vaccinated, particularly the elderly? Then okay, for a temporary period of time to do that, but they have very, very strict type of a lockdown. They're locking people in their homes, which is really they can't even go out, and from what I hear, shop or walk a dog or something like that. That's going to create a lot of pushback on the part of the population. If there's no underlying purpose of what you want to do with it. Okay, folks, well, you're hurting yourself. As long as there's a purpose to it. As long as you have a very clear goal like getting everyone vaccinated, well then have it. Have it, man. China's problem isn't the draconian lockdowns per se, it's that those lockdowns don't have a goal or endgame in sight. That's what makes them so draconian. That's the guy who at least in part was responsible for what we have experienced over the last 2 years and the disastrous effects that will last for years to come. Whether or not justice will ever come for this guy personally, The best justice of all is to collectively make sure that we together build a parallel economy so strong and free that such insanity never happens again. Thanks for being here, folks. Big hug. Ciao. Goodbye. God bless.